G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome to Enduring Conflict, the Stalingrad map. I actually haven't had a chance to put Enduring Conflict on the channel before. Generally when Gaijin has been running it in the past, I've been tied up with other projects or with personal life events, so I actually haven't had a chance to spend much time playing or recording the game mode. Thankfully, that is not the case this weekend. I managed to get in, and the first one I wanted to have a look at was Stalingrad. This is a particular battle era that I really enjoy. I like the lineup of planes for both sides. The Russians had access to a number of Yaks, the LA-5. The Germans had access to anything up to the 109 F4, no 190s. Overall, the list of planes looked like it was pretty close to being balanced, and I expected there would be a little bit of fun. So upon joining the match, the Russians were forcing a rather strong defense over their closest runway to the front lines. I decided my first role in the 109 E4 should be to eliminate enemy fighters that are clustered near that runway. Anybody who gets out of the core of the fight needs to be eliminated. Now, I had looked at the lineup of German planes at the time while I was flying in to engage that I-16 and was trying to work out exactly what my strategy was going to be. Taking out the fighters near the runway would open a hole for the HE-111s and the Ju-88s that were floating around in rather large numbers on the German team at the time, to being able to get in to attack that runway. Unfortunately, while I was eliminating the fighters, I failed to notice what everyone was doing, or what they weren't doing, more to the point. The German team was winning on points, but they were scattered across the entire map with small clusters of fighters and bombers going for incidental targets rather than focusing on anything major on the map. What I probably should have done with this first plane is look for a fight that was already engaged where fighters were defending bombers that were going for a target and try and assist them, rather than attempting to open a hole in an area that contained the highest concentration of Russian fighters on the map. But regardless, the I-16's been eliminated and I'm now manoeuvring with this LA-5. I'm constantly in a higher energy state. I'm just manoeuvring, letting him turn back and forth, working out where he's going to put himself in order to engage. Get a hit as he goes past, nothing critical. He takes himself hard over, that's going to kill a lot of energy. I can follow the manoeuvre, I've got higher energy state, so I'm still going to be in a good position when I come out of this. Fly over the top as he tips it down into a dive, curl over and dive on his back. Easily following him through. Take the lead, another hit, and we got a critical there. Tip the guns in and execute the plane. So, 2 kills to the Bf-109E4 at this time, and I'm only just into the match. My water is overheating, but I'm not too concerned. I've got plenty of airspace to kill my engines and let it cool off if I need to. What I need right now is altitude, so I can set myself into position to re-engage. And I was trying to work out what to do next. Now, we've had a Bf-110 come into the area. We look like we're starting to get a bit of convergence here of fighters. I thought it might be an idea to turn the plane back around and actually start hitting the freshly spawned aircraft as they were clearing the runway. If I can keep the fighter numbers in this area down, or at least keep the fighters on the deck, bombers will be able to fly in and freely finish bombing the runway. I really should have paid closer attention to what the team was doing at the time. We've had a number of deaths, we've got a number of German planes that are still freshly respawned and flying in, bombers are out of range. At this point, a number of bombers have actually switched over to fighters, so we don't have the ground attack capability. The idea was sound, but if I had looked at my team composition at this point, rather than just assuming that it hadn't changed since the moment that I first engaged the I-16, I would have realised that the attack on this runway was no longer viable, and I should have given a little bit of space, let the enemy move and spread, so I was engaging only 1 or 2 fighters rather than, well, almost half the enemy team. Now, you'll notice already in Enduring Conflict I'm talking a lot more tactics rather than just aerial manoeuvres. Realistic battle tends to be just a series of tight dogfights. That's all it ever tends to be. But Enduring Conflict, trying to organise your team to hit particular points on the map and wear down the enemy's score is far, far, far more important. Working out viable tactics that allow you to do this in the most efficient manner is the hallmark of a good team play in Enduring Conflict, and it's something that I would like to see develop more. Sadly, in this particular case, this was a very poor play on my behalf. While I've put myself into a great position to engage enemy aircraft, I have let an LA-5 get on my 6, and my backup that I was counting on to keep my tail clear is already dead. The first plane got taken down flying low, the second aircraft went to try and strafe aircraft on the runway and got cut down in a head-on, and that was the end of my plane. So, I'm back in the 109E4 once again, but this time I'm not looking to force an attack on the runway. I'm doing what I did at the start of the match before attacking the runway in the first E4. I'm looking for individual aircraft that have separated from the group and eliminating them. After my teammates and I got shot down at that runway, the Russian aircraft that were brewing up around that area made a breakout and actually pushed through the German lines. The German fighters have actually been pushed back across the river and are almost back to our first runway at this point. The Russian attack is working out pretty well for them at this moment. My goal in here is to slip in over the top of their forces, which are all fighting at relatively low altitude, and start eliminating key fighters as they're moving to reinforce. If I can take out enough planes, the planes at the front line will die, our forces will be able to push back across the river, and we can start looking at safely attacking key targets once again. So, again we're in with an LA-5, and once again you see me attacking from a higher energy state, from a higher altitude, and manoeuvring in a manner that will allow me to keep that energy and keep that altitude above the LA-5 at all times, never sacrificing the advantage in the engagement for any reason. So the LA-5 tries to make a breakaway here, he turns back sharply and runs. I spot a Yak-1 that's moving to assist him. It's directly to my 6 and it's trying to close range. So I'm aware his backup is coming. At the moment, I'm moving much faster. The Yak is of no risk to me, but it is going to get here eventually. The LA-5 knows it's coming and he attempts to make a turn back. Try and cut in. Unfortunately, the angle of attack is a little bit too high there and I was a little worried about pancaking. Put the 109 into an Emilman right as the LA-5 goes vertical looking for a position on me. Unfortunately, all he does is line himself up into my guns. Now, we've got a Yak coming. The Yak's an excellent fighter in a horizontal engagement. It is also incredibly manoeuvrable and powerful at low altitudes. The 109E4 is no pushover in this particular situation either, but I still like my chances to be better than 50-50. So rather than turning into the Yak, push open the throttle to weapon, start opening a gap on the Yak, and then put the aircraft into a climb, start taking altitude and getting myself into a better position. The Yak can follow me for as long as it wants. Eventually it's going to either be engaged by somebody else or it's going to break off looking for an easier to catch target. At that point I'll turn the 109 around and begin to make my move back on the Yak. It is going to be my second target. The advantage of also flying in this manner is I am separating that Yak from the rest of its teammates. I'm going to isolate it into a position where it will be alone and it will be easy to take out as it will be a one-on-one fight. So continuing to climb away, water is overheating rather seriously, oil has gone into amber, it doesn't matter at this point, it's not bothering me. I see the Yak begin to make its turn back, turn the 109 around and start pushing it into a dive, just leave it on 100%. I'm going to be in a dive the whole way through this. I don't actually need to throttle down in order to cool the aircraft down at this point. I'm going to pass past 500 kilometers an hour and the engine will cool on its own naturally. Now at this point the Yak pilot has seen me make the 180 and has seen the rate of close. He's not going to be able to outrun me, so he turns the plane around looking for a head-on. Yeah, I'm not going to give him one of those. Immediately put the plane into the vertical. Now I have got a timer that has started up. I've got all the speed from that dive that Yak has just pulled a 180 and was moving slow. He simply doesn't have the energy to follow me in this vertical climb for more than a few seconds, and there it is, he's stalled out. I throttle to 0, that fixes my timer issue and immediately cools the water and the engine off. Roll the plane right back around, and what we've got now is a Yak on almost no energy, trying to dive away to gain energy, but I'm diving from a better angle. Once again, the rate of close is high. He rolls underneath, trying to force me into too steep an angle to dive. That will cause me to smash the plane into the ground. Won't be doing that. Just nicks under my guns, take the plane back into the vertical, and I see he's got backup coming in. There's another Yak-1 that is closing fast, trying to give him cover. Quickly roll the plane over and dive sharply back towards the ground. The Yak does get a clip on the fuselage, but nothing serious, and smashes into the ground because he dove too fast. So that's a maneuvering kill on the Yak that was moving for backup. Just looking for a lead on the Yak at the moment. He's just pulled into my convergence. And there we go, set him on fire, but almost out of cannon, and I know Yaks have a tendency to go out, so I want to make sure he is going to be dead. And there we go, mow him down with the machine guns. So, 2 kills, 1 unofficial kill with my second 109, however, backup has arrived for the Yak-1. We've pulled in close to the enemy team's fighters. This Yak-7 is moving to engage. Quickly tip the 109 back over, the Yak-7 manages to cut in and again strike to the fuselage, but no damage. On the second scissor, chop the throttle back to 63%, combat flaps engaged, turn in hard, nick straight in underneath his guns, take it back into the vertical and use gravity to turn back, just in time to watch the Yak 7 overcook it into the water again. So we call that 2 manoeuvring kills, so 2 official, 2 unofficial kills to the second 109. However, I'm being engaged heavily. It's another LA5 on my 6, and this guy's been watching what I've been doing and positioning himself for this engagement the whole time. Once again, I went too deep behind the Russian line. Most of my team is respawning or returning from RTBs at this point, so I have very little backup. There's only one Allied aircraft in the area, and the LA5 gets in a really good shot, takes off my elevator and throws me into the most magnificent spin I've seen in a long time. That was a damn good kill. So, onto my third and final plane of this particular Enduring Conflict flyout, and this time we're in the BF-109 F4, and you'll notice I have the gun pods fitted. This is actually quite deliberate. During the last couple of fights I noticed Russian bombers moving in at high altitude and attacking ground targets, so I decided I was going to try and stop them rather than going for fighters this time. However, the Russian fighters had something to say about that, and I was intercepted by a Yak 7 and an LA5 while I was still climbing out from the runway. So, quick snipe past on the LA5 and blow off its elevator, turn back on the Yak 7. The Yak 7's got the throttles open wide out of this dive and is moving to engage a second 109. I was going to move to assist that 109, however I spotted 2 aircraft moving into strafing position on our close runway. We have aircraft on the ground, so I quickly turned back to try and help with the assist. However, as it turned out, it absolutely wasn't needed. The I-153 was taken out almost straight away, the Yak 7 a few seconds later, and there's the kill for the LA5 that I shot the elevator off. Unfortunately, at this point I had already sacrificed the altitude, so there was no going back to help the first 109, especially not with the weight of the wing pods on board, so it was time for me to fly out and start looking for bombers. So about 8 minutes of flying and getting into position, and I finally locate my first bombers, and it turns out the Russians had changed their minds. Rather than coming in at high altitude as they had been earlier on in the match, the Russians were now all hugging the ground. First target up was an IL-4. Now I needed to be pretty careful with this descent. The IL-4 is actually quite a ways below me, and I'm moving at a fairly high speed, diving in from over 11,000 feet. I've also taken damage to the elevator from an unlucky flak hit during the climb out. So, I begin to roll the plane over for a 0% throttle dive, as I normally would in this situation. However, I'm looking at my speed, over 600 kilometers an hour already, and damage to the elevator. I was thinking this is just going to get myself killed. So instead I put the plane through a wide turn to cut in underneath the IL-4. Unfortunately I lost control, which means I didn't pull up quite as soon as I was hoping to, but soon enough anyway. Quickly straighten out the throttle controls to prevent myself from blacking out a second time, and come out of the blackout just above the IL-4 at 5,000 feet with all the speed on I need for the intercept. And this is why I was carrying the gun pods for this job. IL-4s can be pretty durable, but it's not surviving that many cannon hits. So that'll be my first kill. He's just going to finish burning out. I'm already turning back to engage the next bomber, which is an SB-2M. Again, an aircraft known for high damage tolerance in War Thunder. I have more than enough ammunition to deal with it, however, so I'm not too worried. Unfortunately, I actually mess up my first shots here. I needed to shoot slightly earlier. I was a little late on the trigger during the initial pass, so my first shots only hit the fuselage and the engine rather than the front of the plane and the cockpit. Still put the plane through a wide bank, bring it back around onto the SB-2M6, one burst, and then immediately dip the nose down to avoid the defensive fire. Back in, next hits, set the engine on fire and paint the back of the plane in cannon shells, and bank away back to WEP to open up a gap. At this point I figured I was done with the SB-2M and I could start looking for an additional target. However, looking closely, the fire has already gone out and the aircraft still seems to be retaining flight control, so I'm not quite done with it yet. The wing-mounted cannon pods are now out of ammunition. I only have 64 rounds in the primary MG151 and 595 rounds in the machine guns. Carefully aiming for the right wing, hit right on the engine nacelle, and the explosion takes off the wing. So, that's the next aircraft dealt with. We're down to 33 rounds of cannon in the primary gun, 500 rounds in the MG15s, and I begin my turn back to line up with the next SB-2M. This will have to be my last engagement, as at this point I'm down to 4 minutes and 18 seconds of fuel, and I've got to make it back to the runway and land. So, this time I'm going to be a little bit more careful about my aiming and my firing time. I want to fire right as the plane pulls into the convergence, and there we go. Take the pilot straight out of the cockpit. That is the easiest way to take down any SB-2M. So immediately begin my turn back in the 109 and start heading for home. which I managed to make with 1 minute and 30 seconds worth of fuel to spare. So, not a bad flyout overall. That was 8 kills for the loss of 2 aircraft with 2 additional manoeuvring kills, bringing my total to 10, although only 8 are obviously credited. Not bad for about 35 minutes in the air. Now, I've never really given my opinions on Enduring Conflict before, and that's because in the past, as I said, I haven't had time to play it, or I've had issues with it when it was very early on. Now, playing it today, I think I'm going to be putting a lot more Enduring Conflict on the channel. I really enjoyed this flyout. I really enjoyed the other Enduring Conflict flyouts that I've had this weekend. I think after so many years of just playing realistic battle, Enduring Conflict is so interesting for me because there is more tactics to it than just be the first to climb to altitude, hold altitude, shoot anything at altitude, and then dive on anything below you to win. You actually need to think about what your team is doing and how you're going to force the enemy's points down in order to take a victory in this game mode. I really like that. It reminds me of playing IL-2, which is definitely a good thing. Anyways, ladies and gents, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.